but full awareness. And then thinking comes back completely. Past, future. And then again, you take a deep breath. That's another way of getting in touch with the present moment. Observe your breath, become aware that you're breathing and your thinking stops. During that time when you're aware of your breathing, thinking stops. But you haven't fallen below thought as you do when you drink alcohol or you're very tired, you're about to fall asleep. No. What is happening here is we are rising above thought, which means we transcend thought, which means it doesn't mean we don't think anymore, but we realize a dimension within ourselves that is deeper than thought. That's what so it's not, you don't, of course thinking is necessary, you continue to think, but it's a different kind of thinking. The useless problem-making thinking, the incessant stream of unnecessary and often negative commentary on your life and other people and what's happening, it's part of the present moment being your enemy, that falls away. This incessant voice in the head, it doesn't stop talking to you, it's just I wonder why he said that. What's he doing now? I don't like him because last year he did this and that. He's such a liar. I mean, I never lie, of course, never. And one judgment after another about people and situations, you can't get out of this, and then you start thinking about my life. That's horrible, but it's all pointless anyway, isn't it? What's the point of carrying on? I might as well give up completely. It's so awful, I just can't stand it anymore. Can't take another day, blah, 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 blah. Can't take that. And finally, and suddenly you step out of that. Take a conscious breath. That's why it's called awakening. You awaken spiritually out of identification with that noise-making machine in the head. Oh my God. And the space opens up. That's why it's called awakening. It's like coming out of sleep. It's a kind of spiritual sleep. That you find there's a space where you're not thinking, but you're fully there. And you can sense the being of you as the presence, but it's nothing to do with the historical person. The historical person has subsided for a while, and something else has emerged. And that something else is the enlightened being. And then, of course, it's possible that this enlightened being, then the historical person reasserts itself after a little while, and suddenly no longer aware of that dimension. And then you remember, I lost the present moment. Okay, then don't believe your mind when it says, not now, you can't do it now. You can't take a conscious breath now, it's too much, it takes too long. One conscious breath, no, I have to think about when I've solved my problems, I can do it. No, don't believe your mind when it says, no, now. Space opens up suddenly again. At first, You practice when you're not being disturbed, and then gradually you take it into your daily life. And then you might be sitting in the tube, and instead of getting out your device, you just sit there and present. And you just take your sensory perception happens beautifully. In fact, you're more acutely aware of your sensory perceptions when they're not being veiled by the conditioned mind and its interpretations. You're more directly and deeply aware. You notice it especially with natural things, flower, tree, sky, but also with other humans. You're more just able to be present, and then gradually these little spaces of no thought, you discover that they begin to emerge in your life on a daily basis, almost spontaneously here and there. Become aware of that there's suddenly a spaciousness. And when you notice it, it gets a little longer. You then, and then you begin to invite, so to speak, that dimension, which is it is a dimension of consciousness that before you didn't realize. You begin to invite it into your life. This is a moment. Let's take a moment of presence. And then you're able to bring it into activities. You don't necessarily equate stillness, this inner stillness, with needing to sit still. In the English language, still can mean motionless, but it can also mean absence of noise. So it doesn't, at first perhaps, yes, you practice, or you might do some meditation. Every meditation practice, if it works for you, is designed to help you realize the dimension of being that's always already there within you. It's always already there. So what we are talking about, pointing to, realizing here, is this realization of being, which is sometimes expressed as the pure I am. When you realize who or what are you when you don't remember your past at all. You don't give it any attention. You don't give it any attention, or you don't give the future any attention. Let's just imagine there's only this moment. I'm saying let's just imagine because there is only this moment, but let's say put it aside. Let's say there's only this moment. And in this moment, you do not need to remember your personal history. In this moment, you do not need to remember what might come in the so-called future. In this present moment, let's say you let go of your memory of past or expectation of fear of future, any thought, in other words. Because past and future are experienced as thought forms. Let go of the thought forms. Now, stillness arises, presence arises. Now, an interesting question one could ask: who or what are you now? Without reference to the historical person. What does it feel like to be you in this moment, without reference to the historical person? Very hard to put that into words, but that's you, that's the I. There is something there, but you can't talk about it. a presence remains, a sense of beingness. That's amazing. I am. That's all you could say in that if you wanted to say something. And surprisingly, in the Old Testament, there's a passage where the prophet goes up the mountain and meets God. It's a story, but it has a deep meaning. He goes up the mountain and he meets God. And he asks, "What is your name, God?" And God says, "I am the I am." Sometimes translated as I am that I am. I would translate it as I am the I am. That's the weirdest answer that you could imagine God giving. Isn't that weird? God says I am. And then the prophet asked God, "What shall I tell when I go down, come down from the mountain? What shall I tell my people about your word?" He says, "Tell them that I am spoke to you." That's an amazing story. And then we have, if you want to, those of you who have a distaste of the Bible, I apologize deeply, but just one more passage from the New Testament. Jesus said, "Before Abraham was, I am." So, what does that mean? Does he say, "I've existed for longer than Abraham"? No. It points to his essential reality as the timeless being. I am. He didn't say, "Before Abraham was, I already existed." That would be past. Before Abraham was, I am. It's the I am that is the essence of every being. It is not only the essence of every being, it's the essence of the universe itself. It is ultimately that sense, the deep sense of I am, is your connection to the ultimate source of all life, which I prefer not to name, but it has 3 letters. It's your connection to that, which ultimately it is the unconditioned consciousness, which is a light that emanates from the source into this world, in the same way that the sun emanates light into this world. The transcendent source of all life emanates the light of consciousness into this world. So your connectedness to the source, the 3-letter source, is this deep realization that you are, I am. Timeless consciousness, which is not a byproduct of the chemical soup of the brain. It is not the byproduct of the physical brain, although undoubtedly there is a correlation, a connection between consciousness and the form that consciousness takes when it moves through the brain. Mainstream science mostly still believes that, it has no idea what consciousness is, it doesn't even want to go there. Science even doesn't know what a thought is. Nobody knows what a thought is, because a thought does not exist in the realm of physicality. No scientist has ever found a thought in the brain by cutting up the brain with a microscope. Yes, there are neurons, transmitters, nerve cells, billions of them. There is a connection. But in the same way, if you turn on the radio and it happens to be playing the 9th Symphony of Beethoven, it's beautiful, beautiful. And then something goes wrong in the radio, and suddenly the sound is no longer beautiful, eventually it stops completely. So the radio was necessary for the perception of this beautiful music, but it came from a transcendent source. It did not originate there in the same way that consciousness does not originate. One day science will realize that. There are already some non-mainstream scientists and others who realize that, but you can realize that experientially, one could say. You know, people like Rupert Sheldrake and others have done interesting work in that. So, it's the consciousness that you are is ultimately the greatest mystery of the universe. The universe is the vastness of the universe, the macrocosm is unbelievable. It's a huge mystery. Does it ever end? When I was 11 and 12 years old, I asked my dad continuously, does the world have an end in space? Does space end somewhere? And he couldn't answer it. And I dragged my brain, if it ends somewhere, what's beyond that? Because it hasn't ended, there'll be something beyond the end. There's no answer to that. The microcosm is a great mystery. It's atomic, subatomic realm, very weird realm. These are all great mysteries, but the greatest mystery of all is that the universe is conscious. And science hasn't really been able to do anything with that. The universe is conscious. That is amazing. How do I know that? Well, I'm conscious, and I'm an intrinsic part of the universe. You are conscious, and so the universe is conscious through you. In fact, the universe is engaged in an awakening process. There's an evolutionary process of consciousness. Throughout, it's happening here. You only need to look at your own life. You know that there is an awakening process. There's an evolution of consciousness in your life too. And just your life is only a microcosm of the greater. So I would suggest that the universe is engaged in there's an evolutionary impulse behind the arising of life forms throughout the universe, and that is the greater expression of consciousness. And consciousness is the light that emanates from the source of all life into this dimension. The source is not part of this dimension. So when you sense that I amness, then what you sense is your conscious connection with the three-letter word, your conscious connection with source. And then the amazing thing is, this realization, although that what you realize is timeless, it deepens because there's a paradox. It looks like a paradox because in this dimension time operates, but we're talking about accessing the timeless dimension. But in this dimension, it is gradually here, your realization of the timeless dimension deepens. And then you can sense its power. That there is an underlying vast power that behind it all. Not egoic power. It's the power of life itself. And you can sense that it is the Tao, as the ancient Chinese call it. The Tao that underlies it. You can sense it within yourself as yourself. And it is within and without. Both. There's ultimately no difference. This is the Tao. This is what ancient cultures, no matter where you look on the planet, all ancient European cultures and all tribal cultures, South America, Asia, Australia, they all had a deep sense of the universe had embodied a presence, and everything in the universe is more than what you perceive with your senses. It embodies a presence. There's a soul in the universe. In antiquity, the ancients in Latin called it anima mundi, the soul of the world. In other words, there is an underlying, we could say, vast intelligence that gives rise to the billions of life forms that are gradually evolving. This vast intelligence is beyond, it's transcendent to this physical realm, but it gives life to this physical realm. And that is what all ancient cultures could sense that still. Sometimes it's called panpsychism, which means that pan means all or everything. Panpsychism means everything has a soul. Everything. The ancient Romans believed that also Australian Aborigines, North American Indians, Africa, everywhere, that why did they all believe it? Was it just they came up with a mental thing in different cultures that have no contact with each other? They came up with this mental thing that, let's think. No, the thinking mind was not as active yet, the ego was not as developed yet as it is in contemporary humans. So they still had this ability to sense it in an obscure. Sometimes they misinterpreted it a bit, but they could sense there was something there that was alive. They inhabited a universe that was alive. Then the 19th century came with materialistic science and theory of evolution. Of course, there is evolution, but the evolution is not it's not chance, pure chance. It's like there's an intelligence behind it, and that intelligence operates in you. So I'm just saying those things to give a little bit of context, but for practical purposes, it's not even necessary to go there. For practical purposes, what is necessary is here and now, as much as you can, to access that dimension in your life, which is always brings you into the present moment. And whether meditation is good for you, you have to see whether can be helpful, can also be misleading. How can it be misleading? Meditation can be misleading if you approach it in not the right way. Now, what does that mean? You do not approach meditation in the right way if you regard the practice of meditation is something that you do. It becomes a doing. You can even put it in your calendar into appointments, lunch appointment, meeting at such and such a time, catching the train at such and such a time. 9:30, meditation. So many things to do during the day, and then the last doing is the meditation. But meditation is not something that you ultimately you can't do it. If you have this mind that meditation is something that you do, it becomes a barrier to the realization of being. Because being is timeless here and now. It already is. So if you okay, let's do a meditation. Okay, I've done 15 minutes now, another 5. Okay, now what's the next thing? But the realization of being, you have to relinquish even the idea of doing. So, and that can't be the realization of being is accessible at any moment, which is now. And how is it accessible? A brief cessation in the stream of thinking, not because you have fallen below thinking, but you have risen above thinking. We set space again. And gradually you learn to access that dimension, to be rooted in that dimension in your daily life, rather than having separate compartments. Compartment for being, no, I'm just going to be now. And then another compartment for doing. But you bring the two together, so that even when you do become active, you don't lose touch with the dimension of depth, with a background presence. You can sense your presence, so to speak. It's not yours, we just call it yours. You can sense your presence in the background while you do in the foreground. And you talk to somebody, and you listen, you ask a question, the person answers, but while you listen to the other person, you can sense the presence. You don't necessarily have to prepare the next thing to say. You can just be present. Now, what that present is a space of alertness, alert spaciousness. It's a beautiful gift you give to another human being. The gift of alert presence. You also give them attention through that. There's a connection that happens. When alert presence arises, instead of interaction happening exclusively on the personality level, which is sooner or later leads to trouble and conflict, you might have noticed, especially if you start living with a personality, some other person, it's very difficult. So interaction does not just take place on the level of the conditioned personalities. There is a deeper dimension that is at work. And then you connect through that presence with the other. Oh, that is beautiful. And then you can even, in many cases, you can overlook the sometimes strange ways in which the other person behaves according to their conditioning. You can kind of look through it quite often. Sometimes it may be so dense, the conditioning, that you can't look through it, but these are exceptional cases. Maybe we all don't know some of these exceptional cases. So, beautiful, and if you interact with nature in that way, it deepens the way in which you perceive the natural world. It's not almost as if, it's much better than any drug like acid could do for you. I tried it once and my normal state of consciousness is much better. Because sometimes people say when they take this acid, I don't know if nowadays people still take that, maybe it's no longer fashionable, I don't know. But sometimes it can amplify sense perceptions and everything becomes so vivid. And that means these sense perceptions are so strong that you can't think anymore. So your thinking mind is out of the way and you drink a glass of water and you're amazed by the taste of the water. But you don't have to take acid, you can just be present with it, and it's quite amazing too. So good. don't have to go, oh, whoa, oh. It's very good. Even that is all these little things become very satisfying to do, handling little objects, performing little tasks. That's quite satisfying. So gradually, with the two are no longer separate. And meditation, then you realize when you meditate, don't try to achieve anything. Don't bring future in. Just be with just this moment, there's nothing else. Don't bring in future, just this. Then meditation may work for you, but you don't even have to call it meditation anymore. It's just this presence. And so gradually in daily life, there's then, one could say, there's two of you, or I could say there's three of you. Let's say three. These are temporary divisions. You exist as a physical body. That's the first thing that people see when they meet you. Then you exist as a mental emotional entity that is already invisible because no scientist could detect it with any microscope. So you're the physical body, you exist as an ultimately invisible mental emotional entity. Yes, you can draw conclusions as to the nature of this invisible mental emotional entity by observing how a person reacts and speaks and their facial expressions. You can then see draw conclusions as to the conditioning of this person. But in itself, the mental emotional entity is already invisible. So you essentially are invisible. Even as an ego, you are invisible. And then you go deeper, that's the third. Then you have the being, the unconditioned consciousness. In India, in the Indian spiritual psychology or spiritual philosophy, they have the word Turiya. Turiya means the force. First, second, third, fourth. They divide human consciousness into dreamless sleep, which is the first state of consciousness, the dream state, which is the second state of consciousness, the normal wakefulness, which is the third state of consciousness, and then there's the possibility of Turiya, the fourth state of consciousness, which is exactly this, what we're talking about. And this is where they've taught that in India for hundreds of years, or thousands of years, that the possibility that every human carries that potential. It's dormant in most still, but every human carries that potential, this fourth state of consciousness, which is presence or awareness. Your life purpose, beyond the purpose that you may have on a personality level. Of course, everybody, you have your own life purpose. You have an activity, you have a job, you're learning this, you're learning that, you have projects, you want to achieve that or that, it's all fine. But all those purposes must be part of a larger purpose. And that larger purpose is to live consciously and to bring presence into your daily life through whatever activity you are engaged in. So that's primary purpose is the awakening of consciousness. The fourth state that they've been talking about for thousands of years. And that is wonderful to know because it means your dissatisfying and unsatisfying personal life is not all there is to you. There is infinitely more, and that liberates you from being trapped in a personality. The personality continues to operate in a better way, more harmonious way. It still has its quirks and so on, idiosyncrasies, yes. It continues to perform whatever it does, but something else is shining through more and more. And at times you may find that the personality may temporarily recedes completely, and you then embody just the presence. And then it comes back for a while, but we hopefully not completely obscuring the being again. This may initially still happen to you, temporarily the personality, the egoic self returns and temporarily obscures the being. And you know that because you suffer. You say, oh, what happened? Oh, I lost it. I lost it is an expression in the English language which is used in the casual sense of I lost it usually means I got angry or something like that. But there's a deeper meaning to I lost it. It means I lost consciousness. I lost presence. And this will happen for if you are engaged in the awakening process, you are a hybrid being. You're half human and half the transcendent being. And so you're hybrid, and sometimes you're completely human again, because they're not pleasant moments. And then the being shines through again. That is the purpose of your life. Is you realize that from now on, your personal purpose is secondary. So in other words, what you do is secondary, but how you do what you do is primary. And the how refers to the state of consciousness that you bring to the doing. So, what it is, what is secondary, how is primary. And so, your mission for the rest of your so-called life, I say your so-called life because people say, they say weird things, people say in my life, and they think, I've said that before, and they think they have a life. My life, there's a duality there. My life, there must be two if you say my life, but there are not two, because you don't have a life, you are life. You don't have it, because if you have it, who are you without the life? You are the consciousness. You don't have consciousness, you are consciousness. And so I even go so far as to say, people say, he lost his life, meaning he died. Okay, he lost his life, so there was he, and there was a life. But who is he, and what is the life? Doesn't make sense. There's a duality there that is not, doesn't really exist. You can't lose your life because you are life. Don't think about it too much. I am life. I am presence. I am that. You are that, this ancient Indian saying, Tat Tvam Asi, you are that. I am that. Oh my God. So easy. But it seemed the rest is so difficult. Life becomes easier, so much easier, and that's a challenge that continue to come, and they bring about a deepening of presence. So there's three of you, the physical body, the egoic, mental, emotional, conditioned entity, and there's the being. The being behind the person. So your mission is to become a full human being. Even Confucius said that already. Confucius, the Chinese philosopher, 2,500 years ago, said, when you're not yet fully human, you're still on your way to becoming fully human. But there is another way you can put it. You could say, it's not enough to be human. You could say, you need to go beyond being merely human. That's what Nietzsche probably said. You need to overcome the human and go beyond that. It's just a different way of speaking about it. But the liberating truth is that you are the presence, the I am. It's not a belief, it's a realization here and now, in that space of now. Because the deeper meaning of now, the now is the space for it all. The now never leaves you. The now is the space, is not what happens in the... People think when they talk about present moment, they think in what's happening in the present moment. No, the present moment is not what's happening in the present moment. The present moment is the space for what happens now. It's the space for it all. It's consciousness itself. And consciousness is inseparable from who or what you are. Therefore one could say, or you could say, and I could say, I am the now, in its deepest sense. It's the consciousness for all this. I hadn't thought of that when I was writing The Power of Now, otherwise I would have put it in the book. I will leave you with this we have been addressing, not just conceptually, but also getting glimpses of the deepest truth of human existence, whether it is the deepest truth of the universe, we put that aside. It is the deepest truth for you, as far as human existence is concerned, and it is the true purpose of human existence, is this. What you do for the rest of your life, secondary. How you do it, consciousness behind it, primary. So I'll leave you with this brief moment of pure spaciousness, symbolized by the space between the two hands. This is it. It is within you, and it is without. Wow. So simple.